Hello everyone, and harasimin ke irini, grace to you and peace. In this video we're going to answer the question, was Paul wrong in Acts 21:17 through 26? So let's first read the passage. After we arrived in Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And the following day Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. After he had greeted them, he began to relate one by one the things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they began glorifying God, and they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews, of those who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. And they have been told about you that you are teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children, nor walk according to the customs. What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Therefore, do this that we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take them and purify yourself along with them, and pay their expenses, so that they may shave their heads, and all will know that there is nothing to the things which they have been told about you, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the law. But concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we wrote, having decided that they should abstain from meat sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what is strangled, and from fornication." Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, went into the temple, giving notice of the completion of the days of purification, until the sacrifice was offered for each one of them. Now, the problem with this passage is that Paul seems to have taken an action, condoning the statement of the elders in verse 24 that he was keeping the law. Philason ton nomon. The word philaso means to keep, observe, maintain, to guard for oneself so as not to violate. So by taking this action, Paul seems to be agreeing that he was under the law of Moses. However, this would be in contrast to Paul's clear teaching in the epistles, where he taught, for example, in 1 Corinthians 9:20, not being myself under the law, mion avtos iponomon. And in Galatians 5:18, but if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Uk este iponomon. Romans 6:14, for sin shall not be master over you, for you are not under the law. Ugar este iponomon, but under grace. Now, the reason we are not under the law is that the law ended. In Romans 10:4, Paul writes, "For Christ is the end, telos, of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes." Now, the word end, telos, in the Greek has several meanings. 1, the terminus ad quem, or termination point, cessation, the limit at which a thing ceases to be. The end, i.e. the last, in any succession or series. Number 2, that by which a thing is finished, its close or its issue. Number 3, the end or goal to which all things relate, the aim or the purpose. So the terminus ad quem, or termination point, of the law of Moses was Christ, and specifically the cross of Christ. That was the point at which the law of Moses ceased to be. The cross finished the law of Moses and closed it out. This is because the end, goal, or purpose of the law of Moses was to lead us to Christ. And Christ, having come and completed his cross work, completed the law of Moses. This is stated very succinctly in Galatians 3:24 through 25. The law has become our tutor, pedagogos, to lead us to Christ so that we may be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a tutor, ipopedagogon. The word for tutor is pedagogos, from peis, meaning child, and ago, meaning to lead, thus a child leader. The job of the pedagogos had a terminus ad quem, or termination point, when the child reached manhood. The pedagogos was no longer needed at that point. Just as the pedagogos had a temporary function which ended when the child reached manhood, so the law of Moses had a temporary function which ended at the cross of Christ. So then, why did Paul agree to the suggestion in Acts 21? The answer is found in 1 Corinthians 9:20, where Paul said, Tis iponomon, os iponomon, mi on autos iponomon, inatus iponomon kerdiso. To those under the law is under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. So in Acts 21, we see Paul was simply applying the principle he stated in 1 Corinthians 9:20, that he was willing to act as if he was under the law, even though he was not, in order to win people to Christ. Now, we see Paul applying the obverse of this principle in Acts 17 in the Areopagus. Acts 17:16 through 23 reads, Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was being provoked within him, as he was observing the city full of idols. So he was reasoning in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Gentiles, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be present, and also some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers were conversing with him. Some were saying, What would this idle babbler wish to say? Others, he seems to be a proclaimer of strange deities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, May we know what this new teaching is that you are proclaiming? For you are bringing some strange things to our ears, so we want to know what these things mean. Now all the Athenians and the strangers visiting there used to spend their time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new. So Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I observe that you are very religious in all respects. For while I was passing through and examining the objects of your worship, I also found an altar with this inscription, To an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. Now, what we see here is Paul applying the principle found in 1 Corinthians 9:21, which is the obverse of the principle found in 1 Corinthians 9:20. To those who are without law, as without law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I might win those who are without law. So in Acts 17, we see that Paul was willing to meet those without law, the Athenians, where they lived, so to speak, to engage with them in discussion according to their custom, and to discuss with them as a point of contact their religious practices in order to win them to Christ. So when Paul was in Jerusalem in Acts 21, we see him acting as under the law. But when he was in Athens in Acts 17, we see him acting as without law. Paul sums up this philosophy in 1 Corinthians 9:22 when he says, Tis pasen yegona panta, ina pantos, tinas soso. I have become all things to all men, so that I may by all means save some. Thus, Paul was not wrong in Acts 21 any more than he was wrong in Acts 17. He was simply applying the principle he stated in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, that he was willing to become all things to all men in order to win them to Christ. Thank you, and Evcharisto.